So welcome to Your Language, My Ear, Russian and American Poets at Close Quarters. This, as you know, is a bilingual reading in Russian and English of poetry with discussion to follow. There are 4 poets here and accompanied by 4 translators, commentators. And I'll leave it to Kevin Platt to introduce them. This event came about in part because Kevin approached us and said, would you like to host them? We said, of course we would. And so here we are. They are working in Philadelphia at the University of Pennsylvania with the support of the University's Kelly Writers House, Slavic Department there, Program in Comparative Literature, and a cross-cultural conference grant sponsored by the Mellon Foundation. They're working there on this project of translation. And decided to come here, where this event is sponsored by a whole bunch of people, the Heyman Center for the Humanities, the Writing Program for the School of Arts, Harriman Institute, which I mentioned, Program in Hellenic Studies, Adelaide Japanese Press, Wallace House, Russian American Cultural Center. At this point, I'll turn the floor over to Kevin Platt, who will introduce the poets and others, and say a few words about the project in general. Kevin?
Thanks, Alan. First of all, I did want to thank Alan and the Heyman Center and all of the other entities at Columbia that made it possible to bring this project here. They were really incredibly generous in jumping in and helping to organize all the logistics and everything to move a lot of bodies around. And it's, I think, really quite wonderful and important to have the opportunity to show the work that we've done over the past few days at Penn to a slightly broader audience, both here, and I know it's going to be taped and streamed somewhere. So thank you very much for that. Let me just say a couple of words about what we've been doing very briefly. This is the second time that we've done Your Language, My Ear. We did the first round of it in 2011 and sort of stumbled into a translating practice, which is somewhat unusual. And then repeated it this time with some slight improvements and smoothings out around the corners in terms of process. But what basically we realized the last time that we did this was that the possibility for virtual collaboration on poetic translation, combined with the possibilities for intimate collaborative exchanges, creates a quite unique set of conversations and collective processes that is very different from normal practices of translation. Usually, I mean, the most common translation practice is one translator and one original literary text, and that in and of itself is a process which, especially when you're dealing with people that live far, far away, very often a very distant relationship and sometimes a very agonizing relationship of dependence on someone else to translate your words and ideas into some other language and get them across, and it can be a quite sort of a actually fraught relationship at times. Collective translation does sometimes happen, but I don't know if anyone here is taking part in collective translation efforts. So you get a text, you sit around a table, you get a clean text, you're trying to translate it in another language. That can also be a very fraught relationship. People just end up arguing over little tiny little things, and it can get very sort of bogged down. The possibility of generating what is a draft in a sort of virtual collaboration, what we were doing was just putting things into Google Docs in a shared folder that everyone could have access to generate a draft. And then getting together around the draft with a bunch of people. Some of them had nothing to do with that draft to start with. 4, 5. I think some of our groups had 10 people sitting at them over the course of the last few days. Creates a really different vibe. And it also creates what I think are truly authentically collective texts in terms of translation. It would be really quite impossible, actually, to tell you who were the translators of the text that we're going to read tonight, because I don't know if we know ourselves. Actually, one of our tasks in the next couple of days is going to be to try and go through the texts that we did produce and figure out who actually did work on them, because we'll eventually have to publish them and put some translator names onto them. But these are texts that were worked on by not only the 4 translators and 4 poets who are in this room, but also how many other people? There were like 25 people in various different groups working over the course of like 4 or 5 days. So it was a really collective and interesting effort. All right, enough said. Let me introduce the poets, because that's the main thing, and translators who are here. First of all, we have Shamshad Abdullaev, who is sitting in the center, who is from Fergana, Uzbekistan. And then right here is Keti Chukhrov, who is a writer and critic, but also her practices engage performance from Moscow. Alexandra Petrova, a poet, but now also a prose author from Rome. And Alexander Skidan, a poet, but also critic from St. Petersburg. And then the 4 translators that we have tonight are, as I said, really just part of a much larger collective. At the end here, Julia Dasbach, who is a poet but also a graduate student in the comparative literature program at the University of Pennsylvania. And then sitting right next to her is Alexandra Tatarsky, who is a performer and also writer and translator from New York and sometimes Philadelphia. And then Matvei Yankelevich, who is a poet, also an educator. He teaches at the Columbia. But there was some program you named. There was some specific program I was supposed to name. School of the Arts. There you go. But also a publisher and perhaps known to all of you as the translator and lead editor of the Harms editions and Vidensky editions that have been coming out in the past several years and rocking the American poetic world. And then me. I'm Kevin Platt from the University of Pennsylvania. So without any more ado, let's have some poetry.
So, hi, Matvei. I'm going to read a poem translated from the Russian of Shamshad Abdullaev. Shamshad, вы прочтете после меня оригинал. So we're actually going to try to read translations first, which is somewhat unorthodox, I gather, from my experiences, but it serves as maybe a different purpose in this whole thing, and I think perhaps will be useful to those of you who know some Russian when encountering the original text to have heard the translation. It's perhaps telling or strange to start, but I think this poem needs a translator's note. So that's kind of a funny thing to do at the first reading. But the poem is called Locale as Film in its English translation, Окрестность как фильм, and it has, as you'll see, some references to Eisenstein. It has, I'll just leave it at that, so you can look for those. It's also kind of difficult to read. Locale as film. The blinding white facade which cut abruptly into the brick and cobblestone portico between 2 turquoise columns probably could be mistaken for the torpor of paralysis caused by the stagnant heat through which fig pollen gracefully soared, manifesting for the casual observer its own kind of spinning projector zeal. Meanwhile, racing by with the rustle of petals momentarily blocking from view the cement proscenium in the foreground, a guy on a bike, rain boots. Someone you know? You lifted your hand in his direction. With his back toward you, toward your shadow, he also lifted his hand as if testing the firmness of your gesture and disappeared around the first corner in this sawdust ghost town where earlier, in 1913, even earlier, a tethering post stood, and the sun, flashing off wheel spokes, went down like with essentially southern ephemerality. At the same time, a screw-shaped twister, private conversation barely audible through an open window in the context of the street at some point became rumor, shifted slightly to the left toward the sandy ensemble of zigzag tumuli past the line of riverine settlements, beyond the railway switchyard where in '69 a cargo train happened to stop, and you, standing nearby the train on a pebbly rise, saw through a rectangular hatch crossed out by a metal screen and partly jammed with felt, thrashing scraps of matte, pistachio, resiny, whitish, olive faces of boys with shaved heads from the colony, the juvenile prison, inside a freight car for cattle dung, and instantly thought, why are they trapped in there, in that musty jail cell on wheels, instead of me, who's walking across the park next to a train station in the suburbs on the way to see Que Viva Mexico at the open-air movie house, that brick and cobblestone portico against which his right shoulder slumped against a turquoise column 44 years ago. A 22-year-old projectionist in a cap stood smoking every night in expectation of an audience, so that every evening, as the Garmsil wind wafted around the theater seats on the gravelly, unswept stage floor, and as a sluggish twister curled along the ragged, crumpled edge of the bloodless screen, he could spend all of July in his alcove winding the film bobbins of the Regan agnostic who thought death was just an unhappy ending. Then the man in the cap would close the wide double sash of the door to begin the screening while the evening shadows were gathering, while the malicious thickets of the crowned, thorny gypsum weed surfed the hot wind around the dilapidated, roofless structure, and a large spot of last light reflected off the door jamb fell onto the ground, onto the dusty threshold below the facade.
Shamshad. Спасибо, Матвей. Добрый вечер. Я безмерно рад находиться в стенах Харриман Институт Колумбийского университета, о чем прежде не посмел бы даже помыслить. Должен сказать, что эта встреча состоялась благодаря изумительному энтузиазму и доброму сердцу замечательного человека по имени Кевин Платт, благодаря его соратникам и друзьям, а также с подачи неких невидимых и светлых сил, чье благоволение к нам и чей умысел непостижимый. Спасибо всем. Я прочту стихотворение, которое только что прозвучало на английском языке. «Окрестность как фильм». Ослепительно белую фасадную стену, прерывающуюся вдруг булыжно-кирпичным портиком между бирюзовых колонн, наверняка можно принять за ошалелость оцепенения в застойном зное, в котором плавно парит айвовый пух, являя собой стороннему взгляду своего рода рапид рвения. Мимо тем временем пролетает, заслонив на мгновение лепестковым шелестом цементный просцениум на переднем плане, какой-то тип на велосипеде, в калошах, твой знакомый. Ты поднял руку вдогон ему, спиной к тебе, спиной к твоей тени. Он тоже поднял руку, словно проверяя твой жест на прочность, и пропал за первым углом опилочного безлюдья, где раньше, в 1913 году, еще раньше, торчала коновязь, и солнце, сверкнув на спицах, погасло, как эссенция типичной южной моментальности. К тому же винтовидный смерч, еле слышный комнатный говор через распахнутое окно в условиях улиц когда-то превращался в молвь, забирая слегка влево к песчаному ансамблю коленчатых курганов за чертой приречных выселок, за железнодорожной ветвью, где в 1969 году как-то раз остановился товарняк, и ты, стоя в сторонке от поезда на галечной насыпи, увидел в прямоугольной прорези, перечеркнутой жестяной решеткой и наполовину забитой войлоком, мечущиеся клочья матовых, фисташковых, смолистых, белесых, оливковых лиц бритоголовых подростков из колонн, из детской тюрьмы в навозном вагоне для коров. И молниеносно подумал, почему именно они находятся там, в затхлой камере, на колесах, а не я, идущий по привокзальной поляне в предместье на «Да здравствует Мексика», в летний кинотеатр, к булыжно-кирпичному портику, подле которого, прислонившись правым плечом к бирюзовой колонне 44 года назад, в ожидании зрителей, курил в кепке 22-летний киномеханик, что каждый вечер, пока гаром сильно веял среди зальных стульев на гравийном, неметенном подмостке, и пока вялый смерч вился по ветхой, помятой кайме бескровного экрана, крутил весь июль в своей каморке бобинную пленку рижского агностика, считавшего смерть просто неблагополучным концом. Затем человек в кепке закрывал широкое двухстворчатое полотно перед просмотром, когда сгущались сумерки, когда в желчные заросли венценосного колкого дурмана вокруг обшарпанного строения без крыши волнились на жарком ветру, и большой закатный блик с дверной перекладиной падал на землю на пыльный порог под фасадной стеной. Спасибо. Теперь спасибо. Теперь прозвучит стихотворение «Йодзя» на английском языке в исполнении Кевина Платта.
So this one also has a slight footnote. The title, yodzo, is a Japanese word, which I really encountered first when I tried to translate this poem. And it's a word which refers to the effect of poetry in Japanese, the sort of lingering echo of feeling or aftertaste. You can say it about wine, apparently, in Japanese, too. Okay. Yodzo. Who unsealed your lips, little donkey? Breathe in secret, breathe. No thoughts, no plans, no future nearby, nobody. Clumped clay crumbling at the feet of mountains, and light won't contradict it. In the haze of day where the pavement ends, the locals go backwards over flat white pyramids of asphalt, sturdy paysan in skull caps. You draw the November murk into your lungs, the stale bird shit of the carbide air, but the deserted streets flash like zoom shots in a film. One ritual, many witnesses. Each breath in, breath out, considered on this earth as a prolonged concision, while you look like a Spiran's cadaver. After 50, you honor only the impossible. Psalm 22. So you are not left in shame.
Йодзё – это термин японской поэтики, означающий недосказанность, умолчание, эллипсис, лакуна и так далее. Здесь действительно лучше звучит. Это слово, указывающее на несуществующее, на то, что лежит за пределами текста. Но именно из него и состоит любая свершившаяся поэтическая вещь.
Перевести, наверное.
Да.
Перевести?
Может быть, перевести то, что вы сказали насчет этого, гораздо более красноречиво, чем то, что я сказал. Just Shamshad was much more eloquent in his explanation of yodzo. It's a word which relates to the elliptical, to the unsaid, to the absent meanings that are present in a poem. and out of which all poetry is actually constructed. Did I do it well enough? Yeah.
Thank you for perfect translation. Кто отверз твои уста, ослик? Дышать, украдкой дышать. Никаких мыслей, никаких дел, никакого будущего, никого рядом. Глиняные глыбы осыпаются в подошве холмов, и свет не перечит им. В дневной дымке в конце тротуара местные жители идут спиной и затылком вперед над лежащим пирамидально белым асфальтом коренастой пейзаной в тюбетейках. Вдыхаешь ее, ноябрьскую тусклость, в стылом помете карбидного воздуха. Но пустынные улицы, как вспышки, озаряют кадры, снятые обратным планом. Ритуал один, свидетелей много. Вдох и выдох числятся по всю сторону, затянувшейся краткостью. А ты выглядишь, как спиранс-кадавр. После 50 чтишь только невозможное. 21-й псалом, чтобы не остаться в стыде. Спасибо. Латинская идиома спиранс-кадавр переводится «дышащий труп». Теперь третье стихотворение, конец недели, прогулка с другом. Вновь, прости, Кетти, прозвучит на английском.
So Shamshad also clarified that spirans cadaver means breathing corpse in Latin. So now actually we're going to give you a translation than the original and then a different translation. So the first translation. End of the week, a walk with a friend. So we came out on the pockmarked square, so broad that path transversed is clear. But the rough curve of the clay-walled street with its sour green moss cover and the dirty wind blast that overtakes us from the blind alley as always from behind have silenced the epic scrim. Like Paris, seen for the first time by Rousseau, in its greasy, squawking grayness. This is the spot, a cheap expanse compressed by crawling dust and shoots of brush. We slow our steps, stricken by tranquility, and everywhere it breathes something. A light duration. The sun beats down, beetles shift heavy like grim pilgrims over the furrow, and suddenly each time bare their pale pink wings, breaking into flight. You think we'll be saved just like that, always floating in the air like them. I'm fed up with the everyday pretense of this summer landscape. We lie arms outstretched on the trampled field, 2 crosses in a bird's eye view. I reach for a young reed, catching its fragility with my nail, and you read about how Rimbaud died, keeps dying, words prompted by pain, Allah Karim. But the angel is already at hand on every day of rest.
Конец недели, прогулка с другом. И вышли на бугристую площадь, такую широкую, что заметнее проделанный путь. Но обшарпанный сгиб забора с едко-зеленым мшистым покровом и грязный ветродуй из тупика, нагнавший нас, как всегда, со спины, заглушили эпический декор, словно Париж, увиденный впервые глазами Руссо, в жирной кудахтающей серости. Спрессованной ползучей пылью и побегами косматых кустов дешевый простор. Именно здесь. Замедляем шаг, зараженной тишиной, и всюду дышит оно, что-то. Легкая длительность, солнце пылает, жуки смещаются тяжело, как хмурые пилигримы по стерне, и всякий раз внезапно обнажают бледно-розовые крылышки, срываясь в полет. Думаешь, мы спасемся вот так, постоянно держась на весу, как они? Я сыт по горло этой притворной обыденностью летнего пространства. Мы лежим, раскинув руки на протоптанном поле, два крестика с птичьей высоты. Я щупаю молодую тростинку, цепляя ногтем ускользающую ломкость. А ты читаешь, как умирает Рэмбо. Слова подсказаны болью. Аллах Карем, но ангел уже на подхвате в каждый воскресный день. Теперь второй вариант перевода.
So this translation was actually produced by Frank Sherlock, he's the poet laureate of Philadelphia. Walking to the end of the week, and we rut through the square so wide that the path through seems clearer. A fence steers us on with its dirt gust, moss jackets, its eat-away greens. From the corner, we are taken over, as always, from behind. Epic decor has been blanded, like a city of lights, seen for the first time by Rousseau in a greased, squawking grayscape. Bush shavings and caterpillar dust compress this cheap expanse right here. We slow it down, alive with silence. Something is breathing around us while the sun burns beetles that drag grounded pilgrims stumble through, and suddenly again and again flush wings break into air. You think we'll be saved by hanging around like they do. I'm up to my neck in the cheap novels of summer space, arms outstretched on a trampled field, 2 crosses from the bird's eye view. I grip a blade of grass to hold the fragile in my fingers. You read about how Rimbaud died and dies, words dictated by pain, Allah Karim. But the angel is already here, hanging around each of these blessed damned days. Okay, now we're going to have, I have to speak into the mic, don't I? I guess I just have to stay up. Now we're going to have some poems by Alexandra Petrova from Rome. These first 2 poems are actually translations that were done a little earlier by one of our collaborators in our project, Stephanie Sandler from Harvard University. The Ministry of Hot Water has posted an opening. Director. Well, why not? We can take that on. We've got the sleigh all harnessed to go. The blades are greased with oil. The dogs are raring to go. Our compatriots will send us off. Lead us well, they say, and may the bubbling, airy, and fiery elements prevail. But the temperature drops. The birds find it hard to fly. Space is slowly squeezing itself into a cone. A racing electron stumbles. Still, if our native land calls us to attention, asks us for endurance, we will arise and stand forth, responding to her all-penetrating voice.
Добрый вечер. Hello. Я тоже хочу присоединить мой голос к голосу Шамшада и хору восхвалений Кевину. Большое спасибо. Thank you very much to Kevin and this, like my voice in the chorus for thanking Kevin. And so I will read now the poem that Kevin read before. В Министерстве горячей воды вакантная должность директора. Что ж, мы согласны принять. Вот уже запрягают сани, полозья намазаны жиром, рвутся собаки. Руководи хорошо, напутствуют компатриоты. Пусть бурлящее, легкое, огневое восторжествует. Температура, однако, снижается. Птице трудно лететь. Говорят, постепенно пространство сжимается в конус. Электрон спотыкается на бегу. Но если Родина нас призывает опомниться и потерпеть, все равно мы встанем и выпрямимся на ее всепроникающий голос.
Okay, and here's another one, also by Stephanie Stanler. Beyond the horizon, beyond that bridge, where nothing is simply as it seems. Oh, grass, give me the power of grass, and I shall say, I smite you with my sword. Yes, I say to myself, it's time. Isn't that right? Look, the wind will catch a spent flag of leaves. Arise, I say to myself, arise in despair, even die. Just don't be silent anymore. Speak. This is new. It will be a new life. There, beyond the bridge, over the bridge. We are never coming back to this place. I promise you. Grass. Never. Never.
Thank you, Gavin. За горизонтом того моста, где все устроено неспроста, трава, дай мне силу травы. И я скажу себе, я иду на «вы». Пора, я скажу себе. Разве это не так? Вот и ветер подхватит листьев потраченный флаг. Встань, я себе, скажу я себе. Встань, я скажу себе. Отчайся, и если хочешь, умри. Только, пожалуйста, не молчи теперь. Говори. Это новое, это будет новая жизнь. Там, за мостом, через мост. Мы не вернемся больше сюда. Я обещаю тебе, трава, никогда. Ни.
Another collaborative translation of an untitled poem.
Shall I explain the words?
No, I don't. I think we're good. Catastrophe in Poland Alley. A male bum stole half a roll from a female bum. The tasteless bread of exile. Stale bread of a foreign land, raisin buns. Rain soaks my pockets with no punctuation. You goddamn Empyrean Thor.
Катастрофа в польском переулке. У бомжихи бомж украл полбулки. Пресный хлеб чужбины, черствый хлеб изгнания, булочка с изюмом. Дождь в моем кармане, без знаков препинания. Хлябь твою с перуном.
I'm going to read one of the collaborative translations of In a Small Church, which, for being such a small poem, is so rich that we have 4 variations on it. So this one was done with many people, one of whom is Bob Perlman, poet. Street kids sitting in a small church, itchy, scratchy, buttercup facefuls of lice, sticky eyes looking to rip off what they can. The hell with them, sick 'em, by the scruff of the neck, out. can't make a silk purse out of a sow's ear. Here we have silver, candelabras, chalices. Some come to cry, some to pray. And then, on the edge of his fiery chasm, some bastard from an alien tribe just wants to stuff himself, to drink up, to be.
В маленькой церкви сидели дети бомжей. Личики-лютики, полные вшей. Чесались, присматривали, чтобы подтибрить. А ну их, а ту их, в зашей, не пришей хвост кобыли. Тут у нас серебро, канделябры, потиры. Кому поплакать, кому помолиться. А чужеродный ублюдок на краю своей огненной пропасти просит наесться, напиться, быть.
Things dissolve in darkness. Things dissolve in darkness. I reach far more, far faster than I do not reach for you. But even stars disperse and scatter in such open space. There, between them, distances grow irrevocably. Sometimes we can still make out the helmsman's flags in the Gothic arc of a coming tsunami. And what other constancy is there but in the force that repels us away from each other under a wide open dome, a transom window embossed out of night?
Можно не хлопать, не обязательно. Предметы растворяются во тьме. Скорее стремлюсь, чем не стремлюсь к тебе. Но даже звезды разбегаются в пространстве. Там между ними бесповоротно растут расстояния. Мы же пока еще можем различить флажки морехода в варочных сводах, идущих навстречу цунами. Но о каком постоянстве, если лишь не о силе отталкивания друг от друга, под распахнутым куполом, что словно выбитая в ночь фрамуга?
Another very collectively translated poem. This by the sea, it breaks harder and harder against the hull of the armature. One can't sleep with these gymnastics that rock fate's already loosened screws. And the yoke of the heart rolls out roiling, crash banging back and forth against the me shell. If it's breaking, break it. Hatch out, fly out, as the contour of an intention, as a creature on a ball. At the bottom of an ebbing night, I will grope my way to you, my gaze tripping on what comes to the surface of the licked clean sand, storming after you where you fly and tumble in your own far away.
Это у моря. Оно удаляется все сильнее в борта арматуры. Не уснуть от такой физкультуры, что качает и без того свинтившуюся судьбу. И желток сердца скатывается, грохает туда-сюда, в меня скорлупу. Что ж, пусть сломает, сломай ее, вылупись, вылети, очертанием задуманного, существом на шаре. Я на дне отхлынувшей ночи тебя нашарю, спотыкаясь взглядом об выступившее на вырезанном песке, за тобой заходясь, где-то летящим, катящимся в собственном далеке.
Hooray, Uranus has been neutered, and spring has grown unhinged. A canopy expands above us. White daisy arrows in the grass like a spurt of suns. Irreclaimable nature, cruel and exigent, you're quickly running out of oxygen. Those blessed with gills will see how sap pours from the bodies of lacerated trees. The poles have flipped their magnets. The Milky Way is useless, blocked. The bridges float away like matchsticks. My tendrils burn, O robot that I am.
Ура! Ура нас копили! Весна выходит из пазов, и надувается шатер над нами. Ромашки белострельные в траве, как солнце, брызнувшие вовне. Жестоковыйная природа, в тебе все меньше кислорода. Кто дышит жабрами, увидит, как смола из тел деревьев подсеченных вытекает. Перевернулись все магнитные поля. По Млечному пути ни выйти, ни пройти. Мостки течением сбивает. И щупальца горит у робота меня. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to switch to Alexander Skidan's work, this is a translation of a poem from a cycle of poems that Alexander has written based on some films that you will recognize, and I think we're going to read another poem after this from the same series. This one is Pierrot Le Fou, based on the Godard film. A dark mood, half sentimental, half cynical, could be the same thing, wins out in the end, whereas on the whole it's funny, couldn't be funnier. The trap of narrative, gangster Argo, the Bible, a cinephile's paradise lost. Godard was still in love with red cars, not the little red book, with Speed and Anna Karenina. A melodramatic flair, a clumsy theatrical death in the reckless crossfire, perfectly played. Dark glasses against the sun, ballet steps. A bullet made in Hollywood kills more painfully. But what's really alarming is the absence of so-called love scenes or experiences, temptations. The absence seduces perspective while the continuity is faked, a semblance. Like Joyce, Godard prefers an ambiguous parodic montage, blank even. In death, the human slips away. The Technicolor dynamite caps. Belmondo raises a match as perfect testimony. A ludicrous and perfidious gesture. The collapse of the classical paradigm, the critic would say. The white cigarette burning to ash, in the corner of his crooked lip, Pierrot, the suicide, the face of a future movie star, just like Marat in his bathtub, but reading. Something about Velázquez, maybe Foucault describing Las Meninas in Les Mots et les Choses. Picasso's geometric planes come to mind. I repeat, they didn't see the violence coming. Godard was still in love with red cars, Speed, and Anna Karenina, and he knew even then that man can never coincide either with his own death or properly with being.
As Matvei Yankelevich said, there were several poems in the series written on movies, like an essays, like critical essays. Безумный Пьеро. Мрачный пафос, отчасти сентиментальный, отчасти циничный, что, возможно, одно и то же торжествует в финале. Тогда как в целом это смешной, смешнее некуда фильм. Капкан истории, уголовный жаргон, Библия, потерянный синефила рай. Годар тогда еще был влюблен в красный автомобиль, а не в интербригаду, в скорость, в Анну Карину. Мелодраматический флер, нелепая театральная смерть в бесшабашной по нотам разыгранной перестрелке. Очки солнцезащитные, балетная па, пуля, отлитая в Голливуде, убивает больнее. Что на самом деле тревожит, так это отсутствие так называемой любовной сцены, искушение опытом. Отсутствие совращает перспективу, тогда как последовательность событий – фальшивка, подобие. Подобно Джойсу, Годар предпочитает двусмысленный, пародийный монтаж, зияние, и в смерти человеческое ускользает, разноцветные динамитные шашки, к которым Бельмондо спичку подносит, смехотворный и вероломный жест – лучшее тому свидетельство. Крах классической парадигмы, сказал бы критик.
Истлевает белая сигаретка в уголках асимметричных губ самоубийцы Пьеро с лицом будущей кинозвезды. Как и Марат, он лежит в ванной, но читает нечто о Веласкесе, возможно, Фуко, описывающего в словах и вещах Менины. На ум приходят плоскости Пикассо. Повторю. Насилия и не ждали. Годар тогда еще был влюблен в красный автомобиль, в скорость, в Анну Карину и знал, тогда уже знал, что человек никогда не совпадает ни с собственной смертью, ни, собственно, с бытием. And the next poem from the same series I will ask to read first English translation by Marietta Božević and Alexandra Tatarsky will read. Yes?
Kino I. 1. Aguirre, the wrath of God, sings an Indian song. In the shaft of the Peruvian flute spurts Christian blood. Foliage, sun, inaudibly the century falls overboard. A fugitive to nowhere, from nowhere, Kinski, the camera eye clouding, fucks his virgin child. She's 15, menstrual, the military, sniffs around the smell. Disclosing abdomen, a spear stains the maiden whiteness of her dress, putting a full stop to the intimate story of martyrdom. Death will come, she will have your eyes, babbles absurd flesh. But history goes on. 2. To be sure, his death is the death of a conquistador, magnificent hunchback, carbuncle, in a word, the pearl of the Spanish crown, the standard stitched with ink and gold, the crimson heart blossoms on the sacrificial stone. Aguirre, the wrath of God, sings an Indian song. In the shaft of the Peruvian flute spurts Christian blood. Foliage, sun, the slow lead of the river, the poison arrow in the cervical vertebrae of the commander rotates the insubmersible raft, Noah's Simeon Ark. In the blind spot of the rotating landscape, in the calm spot of the conversion of the world, and in death he raves of El Dorado.
Thank you. И по-русски. Русский перевод. Первое. Ну, вы узнали, это фильм Вернера Херцога, конечно. Вернер Херцог's movie. Is used here as a basic structure. Агира, гнев Божий, поет индейскую песню. В скважины перуанской флейты хлещет христианская кровь. Листва, солнце, бесшумно за борт падает часовой. Беглец никуда, ниоткуда, Кински. Помутившейся кинокамеры глаз трахает невинную тщерь. Ей 15, регулы, солдатня принюхивается к запашку. Отверзая живот, копье пятнает девственную белизну платья, ставит точку в интимной истории страстотерпца. Придет смерть, у нее будут твои глаза, щебечет смехотворная плоть. Но история длится. 2. Разумеется, его смерть – это смерть конкистадора. Великолепный горбун, карбункул, одним словом перл в испанской короне, штандарт, расшитый золотом инков. На жертвенном камне распускается пунцовое сердце. Агира, гнев Божий, поет индейскую песню. В скважины перуанской флейты хлещет христианская кровь. Листва, солнце, медлительный свинец реки, отравленная стрела в шейных позвонках командора вращает непотопляемый плод Ноев обезьяний ковчег в мертвой точке вращения пейзажа, в спокойной точке обращения мира, и в смерти он грезит об Эльдорадо. Unfortunately, we hadn't enough time to check out and make corrections for other translations, so I will skip those drafts. We really were working on for 3 days, and we'll read several short fragments from the book published by Ugly Duckling Press, and from a composition called Scholi, translated by Jenny Turovsky, whom I'm so happy to see here after so many years. Пролеты моста, колеса мельниц, рожок почтальона и перегоны метро, и Гёте, конечно, не прислоняться, не спать, крепкие мужские объятия, сентиментальная чепуха, заткни пасть, буквы М и Ж стерты. Spans of a bridge, the wheels of windmills, the postman's horn and the space between stations, and of course Goethe, no leaning on doors, no sleeping, firm masculine embraces, sentimental nonsense, shut your trap, the letters M and W erased. Все, что связано с подлинностью, мыльный привкус, техномузыка из дверей кафе, пролегомены ко всякой будущей метафизике, воображаемое решение, катакомбы, никогда не говори со мной таким тоном, красно-коричневая чума, новый порядок означающих the sun is going so fast, березки, полупроводники, сновидения, обрезки ногтей, сопротивление бесполезно. Everything having to do with authenticity, taste of soap, techno, coming out of the cafe doors, prolegomens, imaginary solutions to any future metaphysics, catacombs, never speak to me in that tone of voice, a real brown plug, a new order of signifiers, the sun is going so fast, birch trees, semiconductors, dream visions, nail clippings, resistance is useless. And the last. Реклама Вольва и Вульвы, Нила и Сены, отца и сына, параллелизм, аллюзии, пустые места, теодицея для пассажиров с детьми, паранимическая аттракция – это не стихотворение, это теологические ухищрения товара, самореклама, откровение Святого Духа в абсолютной разорванности. Advertising of Volvo and Vulva, Nile and Seine, father and son, parallelism, allusions, vacant seats, theodicy for passengers with children, paronymic attraction. This is not a poem. This is the theological dodge of commodity, self-advertising, the revelation of the Holy Host in absolute rapture.
Hello, my name is Keti Chukhrov, and actually it's it's not so often that I take part in any literary readings because I actually don't write poems, but do dramatic plays or poetic plays or dramatic poems, which are more for acting or performing rather than regular literary pieces. But anyway, I'm really grateful to this experience that we had, and I find it absolutely an adventure because so many people took part in this translation. I mean, around 8 people, and I remember even when I go through the text, I remember a contribution of each. So, and the whole debate of it, and it was an incredible experience, really. So, I really thank all those who took part in this translation, including Alex and Kevin and Marietta Božović, who is not here, and Bela Šajević, who is not here, and Stephanie Sandler. So this is a play which is called Communion, and we'll be reading only a fragment of it, we just go through. We named the dramatic persona. The characters are Nita, art photographer, daughter of a prominent businessman; Ira, her friend and art critic; and the third character, Diamara, abbreviation from dialectical materialism, house painter from Nazran, who works for Nita, who is renovating her apartment. I will be Nita, and Sasha will be Ira and Diamara, my servant. My stomach.
Didn't I tell you cheap eateries are dangerous? Crude cognac can't save us from lack of love.
I only drink for Vyacheslav so that some commonality between us might arise.
What do you need a man for if you have a car? And money too, if you believe in God and understand him, and you interpret scripture so precisely. Your legs and breasts are all in place. You wear Gucci. You're an awesome artist. The view from your apartment is so glorious. You smell divine, like flowers from the heavens. You take communion and have grace, it seems. You love the motherland and are aristocratic. You're good with ultramodern technologics. You are kind and never get depressed. You comprehend all in the structure of the state and live in such a goodly state. Participate in projects of the state as a designer. Your priest considers you half saint. Your ancestors are noble and illustrious, and seafood every day, and taste so rarefied. The icon by the bed streams myrrh, and blessed, blessed, blessed.
But all of this is in her. That's why her own self she doesn't see. She cannot love herself. That's why she needs another to experience love. And so, you know, besides this Vyacheslav, she loves a soccer player.
How could you love a soccer player? And for what?
I list the motivations for my love. Fine underwear and huge dark body. A heavy jawline and white teeth. And have you seen his toes? They're eloquent. They latently imply deep intellect. Here's a photo.
Don't know. To me, he looks dumb as an elephant.
You're nuts. Just look, the face, the eyes, the ears.
Then what? Do you love Vyacheslav or this other asshole?
Slava, of course. He's an artist, but unfortunately has a wife. For sex, a naked soccer player. For the soul, an artist. You know, being in his studio makes all so meaningful. His every sketch a revelation. Just yesterday, Slava and I were drinking liquor. I was in my Max Mara bra, but probably he wanted me so badly he couldn't get it up.
So did you up and go?
No, first I threw up. Then he told me if you're too in love, the sex part gets more complicated.
And when exactly do you love your God?
And I say, dear Mara. No, you are dear Mara, so. The servant says,
And when exactly do you love your God?
the real cannot be disavowed, nor politics undone. But when again I see my God, all shall be overcome. Long ago I tired of Eminem and fell in love with R&B, but God has 100 times more status. He's much cooler than my Lexus. You'll really like God. He can give so much. He's always with you, always everywhere with everyone. He speaks without words. He's by your side in the dark. You never have to pay him. Just say his name and you can ask for everything.
Even legs like Naomi Campbell's?
Don't know. He gave me legs more like Madonna's, with muscles really ripped from training. The kind that Vatska really liked, remember? I only wanted legs like that above the knees and asked for slimmer calves, but prayers must have mixed up.
As for me, I don't ask anything from God. The husband is there, the child is too. The customers for whom I do the job provide me with accommodation. Well, girls, I understand what it means to believe. It's like when everything is shit and you force yourself to venerate it. There aren't many people who can love people. Before eyes, a vacuum, void. We are usually expecting tenderness, but unable to provide it ourselves. I, for one, am tender all the time. I can be tender towards dishes, cupboards. I love my feng shui stones. I caress my doors.
If some rag is in fashion, there's soul in that schmata. If something on the body glitters, that means the body itself glitters. Father taught me to only love the best, to grasp the beauty of the thing. So you must buy only the elegant, this, everything that, underwear, buttons, knives. We chose you, dear, because there's soul in you. You lay the paint on so thorough, the window trim looks so subtle. But somehow you're slow. Low productivity. Efficiency is also low. The room is not even halfway done. The cornice is unpainted. The moldings need more work. The floorboards are not yet nailed down.
But you yourself are forcing me to chat about God, the soul, faith, love, the universals, humanity, and beauty.
Fine. We'll bring you tea now and then leave. Ira brings Diamara tea and then leaves with Nita. Diamara sings her grandfather's favorite song.
We're truly communists because it's here and now we plant our feet, yet reach out for the future's peak and make today tomorrow meet. We're truly communists because it's we who hear the voiceless classes, and those who, cast away and sundered, we unify in singing masses. We're truly communists because, even marching through the quiet of rising seas, we sense the beat and never to the rear retreat. I wonder what it is like to be cool, to sink with a sigh in the swimming pool. A person and grid of bars, who can guess this pun? Nita speaks of faith and grace, Ira about art, and I can speak of an emotion, but I don't know how to start. So there we were, Sanya, Genka, and I. We were supposed to move into the dorm straight from the station. Everything was fine. We had handed over our passports when suddenly the assistant director says, "We're under construction," he says. "You can't move in until November. That is in 6 months, and we only had enough money for food until we found work." So we left. Sanya went to his old boss. Maybe, he says, there's some work for him there. And I waited on a bench with Genka and the suitcases on Gogolevsky Boulevard. Where can you go with a kid, I thought, if we don't find the place to stay today? We spent 7 hours on that bench. Genka would run around, then nap on a suitcase or on my lap, and I felt so calm for myself, for everyone. Everything's fine, I thought. There's no grief. It is impossible if you bear it all with grace. "Genka, get over here," I said. "Mama," he said. I looked into a puddle and someone's face smiled back. "Gena," I told him, "we won't sleep in a bed tonight. We'll stay here. Lie down on my lap." I covered him up with a coat and fell asleep myself.
Nita and Ira in a car. That Dia is a trip. Funny name, Diamara. You know, she works well for cheap, only slowly, and it's bad she stays the night. But we can't have her sleep at this station, right? Let her live here until she's done.
And what, after that we let her die?
Bite your tongue. I'm just trying to ennoble, to educate people. You have to start with art and then style, makeup and baptism. In principle, even trash can shine. Let's stop at that new store. At 6 I'm having my hair done. Can you wait half an hour? And after we could drop by Petrovka. They're letting you touch the Iverska icon today at the church. We'll make it before the opening.
No, I can't go to the store. I have to get to the printers, the openings tonight. There's never enough time. It's crazy.
But the icon won't be there forever. Just think, it streams with myrrh. It can grant any wish.
I'll be with my car tomorrow, and we'll go kiss the icon before work. Ooh, are those shoes new?
What, I've worn them before. Chic, right? And they weren't cheap. Got them for 3,000 in Jerusalem.
They are great on you. But I wouldn't spend that on a pair of shoes. Isn't your Nastya's living there? That kind of money would last her 2 months.
Ira, you think like a housewife, like the envious and cultured masses. Do you know how much I've given her and her kids? Don't worry, they've got quite enough.
Come on, what matters is that God shares your love of fashion. Your car, your turtle soup, souffle. Look at that billboard. Volochkova is advertising bidets. Crappy design. They couldn't even find a decent font.
Ira, for a believer, all is suffused with the Almighty. Even that silly ad is in a way the face of God. If you accept God, accept the world, and the way in which our Lord cares for it. What happens in heaven is, of course, important, but earthly life is also lit by Him. Wealth, luxury, beauty are natural parts of life, and if there were no rich, who would support the poor? Those lefties would rather choke than give away a ruble. The poor are always with us and will always be, the destitute, untalented, envious, ugly, and sick. God granted that lot to them, to suffer that way, and we suffer in our own way and try to help them. Dad gave our mechanic 3 CD players yesterday, and I send candy to Dusia's kids each month. I'm even giving Diamara my Kenzo coat.
Fine. Kiss the icon for me. Gotta run. My phone's ringing again.
Nita by the icon in the church on Petrovka. Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy. Lord, forgive me for my love of money and success. Grant me power, strength, influence over people, and let them obey. Let everything I love be admired by all of them. Grant me, O Lord, knowledge and understanding. Teach me the wisdom to conquer, rule, and reign. Should I go on in Russian or start from the beginning, which is better?
I think you should do the part of the piece that you already
Okay.
did. Because
Okay, and I do it shorter. I have the book, actually. You needn't, yeah. Ну, я думаю, что для тех людей, которые слышали это по-английски, не нужно переводить. Здесь 3 действующих лица. Нита, фотохудожник, дочь бизнесмена, Ира, подруга, и Диамара, маляр из Назрани. И я буду сама читать все роли. Нита, живот мой, Ира. Я говорила, вреден общепит, коньячный спирт нас не спасет от нелюбви. Нита, я только ради Вячеслава выпиваю, чтоб общность между нами возникала. Ира, Зачем тебе мужчина, если есть машина у тебя, и деньги есть, и в Бога веришь, и понимаешь Его? Так точно порой интерпретируешь Писание, и ноги есть, и грудь на месте, и Гуччи носишь, и прекрасный ты художник, и вид с окна великолепен, а пахнешь, как райская трава, и причащаешься, и благодать имеешь вроде, и любишь родину, и роду аристократическому принадлежишь, и в технологиях ультрасовременных разбираешься, добра ты, и не бывает у тебя депрессий, и в государственном устройстве понимаешь все, и в государстве живешь таком хорошем. Участвуешь в проектах государства в качестве дизайнера, и духовник тебя считает полусвятой, и предки благородные, прекрасные, морепродукты каждый день и вкус изысканный, икона мира носит в комнате над изголовьем, и свят, и свят, и свят. Де, так это в ней самой все это, а себя она не видит, значит, и любить не может. Вот почему другой ей нужен для любви. Она ведь, знаешь, кроме Вячеслава, еще и футболиста полюбила. Ира, ну как же полюбила ты футболиста и за что? Нита, я перечислю мотивации своей любви. Трусы такие тонкие и тело темное большое, тяжелый подбородок и зубы белые, а пальцы на ногах ты видела? Они красноречивые, свидетельствуют о латентном интеллекте. Вот фотография. Ира, не знаю, по мне тупой, как слон. Нита, да ты с ума сошла, смотри, какое лицо, глаза и уши. Ира, так я не поняла, ты Вячеслава любишь или этого козла? Конечно, Славу, он художник все-таки, но у него жена. Для секса голый футболист, а для души художник. Ты знаешь, в мастерской так все осмысленно. Набросок его каждый просто откровение. И вот вчера, когда мы пили спирт со Славой, я в лифчике была Макс Мара. Но, видимо, так сильно он хотел меня, что у него не встало. Ира, опять тебе, наверное, импотент попался, и вы ушли? Нита, меня рвало сначала, потом он мне сказал, что если сильно любишь, до секса доходить сложнее. Диа, а Бога своего когда ж ты любишь? Нита, реальность невозможно унять, политика неумолима, но когда я вижу Бога опять, все преодолимо. Эминем меня давно достал, я R&B полюбила, но Бог — это то, что престижнее во 100 раз, круче, чем моя машина. Бог вам очень понравится, ибо Он может многое дать. Он всегда с тобой, всегда со всеми везде, говорит молча, сопровождает в темноте. Ему не надо платить, только упоминать, и просить можно у Него почти все. А ноги, как у Наоми Кэмпбелл, тоже? Не знаю, мне он дал ноги, как у Мадонны, с мышцами со следами накачки. Такие ведь, помнишь, нравились Вадьке. Но я хотела только выше колен. Голени я уже просила другие. Но молитвы как бы наложились. Диа, а я ничего у Бога не прошу. Муж есть, ребенок там. Заработок, квартиру заказчик предоставляет. Ира, я поняла, что такое девочке верить. Это типа, когда все дерьмо, а ты заставляешь себя, чтобы нравилось оно. Диа, мало таких людей, которые любят людей. Перед глазами вакуум, ничто, а они все время за свое ласки ждут. Сами-то не могут ее дать. Ира, а я, например, все время могу что-то ласкать, посуду ласкаю, шкафы. Очень люблю камни фэншуй, двери там обнимать. Нита, если что из шмоток в моде, значит, душа есть в этом кломоте. Если что на теле блестит, значит, и тело само блестит. Меня папа учил все лучше ценить, понимать красоту вещей. Следует покупать только элегантное то все, что трусы, кнопки, ножи. Мы тебя выбрали, Диа, так, как много в тебе души. Ты стены так плотно красишь, узоры на подоконниках так свежи. Только долго вот работаешь как-то. Производительность, эффективность низки. Комната даже на треть не сделана, карнизы не докрашены, лепнину надо доработать. Полы не скреплены. Диамара, так вы же сами заходите болтать, заставляете о Боге, душе, вере, универсалиях, человечестве, красоте. Ладно, мы тебе сейчас чай принесем и пойдем. Диамара поет любимую песню своего деда. Мы, коммунисты, тем, что ногами в сегодня стоящие, тянемся к завтру в теме и тянем его настоящее. Мы коммунисты тем, что слышим глаз без глазы, всех, кто разрознен и нем, собираем в поющую массу. Мы коммунисты тем, что даже шагая по глади, море встающего чуем темп и не прячемся сзади. Нита говорит про веру, благодать, Ира про искусство, а я могу рассказать про одно чувство, только не знаю, как сказать. Вот мы с Саней и Генкой прямо с Казанского приехали в общежитие, все нормально, должны вселиться, и паспорта уже сдали, и вдруг замдиректора говорит, ремонт, говорит, и только с ноября могу оформить, то есть через 6 месяцев только, а у нас денег только на еду, но пока работу найдем, но ушли оттуда. Саня пошел к заказчику бывшему, может, говорит, что из работы уже есть, а я на скамейке с чемоданами на Гоголевском с Генкой жду. Куда идти с ребенком, если сегодня, думаю, ничего не найдем? 7 часов просидели, Генка бегает, то на чемодане уснет, то на коленях у меня. А я почувствовала покой, за себя покой, за всех. Все, думаю, хорошо, нет муки, невозможно она, если красиво стерпеть. «Генка, иди сюда», ему говорю. «Мама», он говорит, «я посмотрел в лужу, там улыбается чье-то лицо». А я ему говорю, «Мы лечь сегодня должны не в постели, Гена, а здесь. Так что ко мне на колени лезь». Его курткой накрыла и сама глаза закрыла. Thanks.
That is the end of our reading, but we could take a few questions from the audience if there are questions.
It's often been said that each generation needs its own translations, and considering how words change their meaning, it seems true. I mean, goodbye no longer means God be with you. And the French word baiser is embarrassingly ambiguous. And the Constant Garnett translations brought the classics home to English readers. And yet, what you find in her, the Russian expression, I think it's "Shelyu tvoi nogi," comes out as "I kiss your feet." What do you do about that? I mean, you don't want Raskolnikov saying to Porfiry, "Hi, Grandpa, what's up?" So how do you handle these things, and how do you handle the use of dialect? Would Berlin dialect be translated into Moscow dialect, or what?
Who wants to answer?
Impossible question.
Истории перевода, проблема языка, немножко делать новые переводы для новых поколений в связи с новыми языковыми языками. Вот это один вопрос. Вот немножко в этом касается нас. Мы делаем современные переводы вот современной поэзии. Но другой вопрос касается проблемы диалекта. Вот как перевести вот сугубо местные значения идиомы, вот, нужно перевести в другие какие-то побочные языки.
Just summarize some of the answers that have come out in the translation of the question for Shamshad in Russian. One could say that the first question isn't really our problem right now because we're working on contemporary poets. Though it is a very complicated question or a complicated problem for a lot of translators. I think in the second question, the issue that comes up, and we were talking a little bit about different Russians or unified Russians, different kinds of Russian language at the conference as you can, and it seemed that one thing that comes up in your question is what do you do with the particular Berlin kind of dialect. But we're translating mostly from Russian to English. So we also have this kind of interesting situation because Russian is such a homogeneous by and large compared to something like German or even English particularly, which has so many Englishes. Russian is fairly flatly not regionalized so much, quite clear to
Petersburg and Moscow would be pretty much identical.
Yeah, the empire I think seemed to have both in the Tsar's period and the Soviet period kind of flattened the language through very consistent literacy programs, but also so I think also through an official kind of language. My view.
I mean, for various reasons, some of these problems weren't hugely problematic for us in this translation enterprise, although they could have been. When you talk about the homogeneity of Russian language, I think that does actually hold fairly well, especially for literary language, I think we could say. It's not to say that there aren't regionalisms, but we were not struck in dealing with these poets with regionalisms and sociolects associated with regionalisms. Keti's work is really, deeply enmeshed in sociolects of various sorts. And therefore, I mean, the question does apply in certain ways, except that I think we, basically took Moscow for the center and its stratifications as representative of the stratification of a Russian society as a whole, which does make a certain amount of sense because it's about, if we think about the social stratification of Russian society, it's a pyramid with people like the, Nita only present really in Moscow or in other huge, cities. She is the representative of both authority and in a certain kind of economic sense and a certain kind of 1%. Yeah, she's a 1%er of our 1%er, basically. So, and we translated that, I think, into our conceptions of American, sociolects that correspond. But some of the other poets that we were translating were working really in a literary language, which was marked for its sophistication, and we aimed for the literary language in English that corresponded to that sophistication, that literary and conceptual sophistication. And I think that was really how those translations happened.
Допустим, я не работаю в рамках диалектальной поэзии. Время от времени использую национальные реалии или архаичную лексику. Но если бы подвернулся бы такой случай и мелькнул бы какой-то элемент ферганского диалекта, а такой существует в природе, то ему эквивалентом явился бы, допустим, йоркширский диалект. Чем непонятнее, тем лучше.
So Shamshad was saying that he doesn't usually use regionalisms in his writing. At times, for specific effect, he uses various regional or archaic kinds of language, and then it's possible to find sort of corresponding regionalisms in the English language, such as, for instance, Yorkshire speech. The more difficult to understand, the better.
This is kind of connected. It's about who writes Russian poetry today. And one of the questions, it comes out of a collection that I'm editing of Greek poets who are Chechnyan, Iranian, write in Gringlish. I mean, they're writing in Greek, but certainly they're coming from a lot of different traditions. That's a very multilingual moment. So I'm wondering, in Russia right now, you're talking about a kind of homogenization at a kind of literary level, but are there lots of people who are using this language who are coming from very many different places? And then what is the challenge that poses? Translation. Does it get put into kind of a standard English, or does it get put into a kind of a multilingual Spanglish or Chinglish or whatever? So that's the question.
I would say that yes, it's a very interesting question, but the point is that contemporary poetry, maybe it is both its merit and drawback, has become so reflexive and so cognitively biased that it, by definition, by virtue of its cognitive intensity, is becoming linguistically quite refined. Whereas where we could find the intonational, the regional, the vernacularism dispersed in the social space, this would be more prose, those modes of expression which are biased by speech. And then you could find it in film, more in prose, in drama, but also these sprouts of the vernacularisms, they appeared abundantly in Russian language after the demise of the Soviet Union, because Soviet Union, along with the ideological framework, was very much controlling this, the already mentioned homogenized linguistic and proper form, both prosodically but as well lexically and grammatically. But nowadays, as long as empire is dispersed, the vernacularisms proliferate as well. And, well, I wouldn't agree that there is some kind of homogenized language. If you go to Smolensk region, for instance, in everyday speech, in the majority of people, you hear completely different Russian language. And this Russian language will be maybe, well, not understandable for those people who live in Moscow, and those people who live in Smolensk region and are used to say "А воду на голову почему налила?" They wouldn't understand probably. This is reality. They wouldn't understand a refined prosody or proposition of contemporary poetry. But this is the reality, probably.
I mean, it's also true, however, that you have various different regional sort of phenomena in contemporary Russian poetry that reflect not so much regional dialect or languages, but also regional interpretations of literary tradition and international borrowings. So I've lately actually been doing a lot of work on Russophone poets from Latvia, who are using the same literary language, I think, very recognizably so, as contemporary Russian poets in Russia. Yet they also have, first of all, near at hand, a high degree of interconnectedness with the Latvian poetic scene and with some of its formal specificities. And they have their own very specific, I think, menu of cosmopolitan borrowings. And I think that in that, one actually can find very specific instantiations of what contemporary Russian poetry is doing, not so much specific to a local dialect, but a specific angle of vision on world poetry. I think you see it quite differently from Moscow or from Riga or from St. Petersburg. So I think that could be true. Oh, yeah, the first question was who is writing Russian poetry? And I think the spirit of the question was, are people who are not Russians writing Russian poetry? And I don't know, I'm interested to hear the poets answer that. I have my own answer, but I think theirs might be more interesting. Or should I give my answer first? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, if what is meant is some kind of national diversity, then it's quite diverse.
Yeah.
Even in this case.
Of course. I mean, in this case, in terms of the diversity of the people who are sitting here, we have well, I don't want to speak name people's identities, but they are diverse. Let them name who they are. But the other thing which has to be said is the Soviet Union and the Russian Empire were always well, the Soviet Union more than the Russian Empire, right? But the Soviet Union in particular, a multinational state with a dominant language and a dominant literary impulse that created a shared place for literary activity by people of various different, what were then called nationalities. So it was quite usual for many different nationalities, I guess what we would call ethnicities, of the Soviet Union, for people to be educated in and become writers in Russian. And that situation has persisted to a greater or lesser degree in different parts of the former Soviet space, and also in terms of generational issues here. I mean, we are still at this table sitting with poets who relate back to that social scene through their biographies and educational backgrounds. So, but do you guys want to add something to that?
Насколько я знаю, тюркофонная поэзия Средней Азии крайне литературно-центрична, нормативна и придерживается пуристской линии. А низовой народный язык остается в рамках оральной культуры, устного народного творчества. Если речь идет о том, кто пишет стихи, то ориентировочно можно ответить так. Большей частью хорошие стихи у нас пишут аутсайдеры и интеллектуалы. Они же аутсайдеры, и они же одновременно интеллектуалы.
So there were two parts to the answer there. One was about the Turkic tradition of writing poetry in Central Asia. And Shamshad said that there's a conservative and folkloric tendency in this poetic tradition. But then in terms of the Russian poetry, and I think he means to say pretty much everywhere in the Russian literary geography, who writes important Russian poetry, it's outsiders and intellectuals, which happen to be the same people. Other questions? Well, if that's it, then first of all, thank you all for coming. And there is, am I correct? There's a reception right next door, and everyone is invited to stay and continue conversation with the poets and translators and among yourselves over a glass of wine. Maybe there's even cheese involved. So.